Story 1. There are places in this world that don't want you to leave. And when you're 10 years old, you don't know that yet. I grew up in the kind of place most people only see in movies. Deep, dense forest stretching in every direction outside our back door. Central Virginia, where the trees grow so thick that even in summer the light has to fight its way through. Holloway County, population not many, woods endless. My best friend was a girl named Callie. We'd been inseparable since second grade, and like every kid in that part of the world, we spent most of our free time doing exactly what our parents probably would have told us not to do if they'd been paying closer attention. Wandering. We had a system, a logic. Follow the deer trails, mark your turns, stay inside the sound of the highway. It worked for years, until the summer it didn't. It started the day we found the creek. We'd been pushing through the woods on a trail we hadn't taken before, probably 2 miles from the nearest road, when the trees opened up just a little, and we heard it, running water. Clear, cool, constant. We followed the sound, and there it was, wide enough to swim in, deep enough to float, banks covered in thick green moss, soft as a carpet. The water was so clean you could see the rocks on the bottom. No bugs because of the current. No snakes that we could spot. We looked at each other and didn't even have to say it. We'd found our place. We swam for hours that first day, then walked back home for dinner, already making plans for the next morning. Pack a lunch, bring a blanket, spend the whole day there. Just us and the creek and the Virginia woods in full summer bloom. We were 10. We were fearless. We were so sure we knew those woods. We headed out the next day around noon. Same entry point, same trail, or so we thought. At the spot where the creek should have been, there was a clearing, wide and perfectly round, like something had pressed down on the trees from above and told them to part. The floor was carpeted in ferns, tall, thick, prehistoric-looking ferns that came up to our knees. We'd never seen this clearing before, not once, and we knew those woods. Callie and I looked at each other. We were hungry, we were tired of walking, so we decided, lunch first, creek after, and honestly, that part was wonderful. We ate our sandwiches and watermelon. We laughed too loud. We spit seeds at each other from 3 feet away and kept score of who got the farthest. The ferns caught the light in a way that made the whole clearing feel warm and secret and ours. For maybe 45 minutes, it was a perfect afternoon. Then we packed up our bags and set back out to find the creek. That's when the woods changed. I don't mean we got more lost. I mean the woods themselves changed. The light got lower and colder faster than it should have. The sounds of birds and insects thinned out and then sort of stopped. And Callie, who was not a nervous person, who had never once been scared out there in all our years of wandering, kept snapping her head around to look behind us. I didn't ask her why, because I already knew. After maybe 30 minutes of walking, we hit something that made us both stop and stare. In the middle of nowhere, sitting in a rough arrangement between 3 trees, was a bathroom. A full bathroom, sink, toilet, bathtub, all overgrown with ivy and rust, moss creeping up the sides, but unmistakably arranged, like someone had put it there on purpose, like someone had decided this spot in the middle of the Virginia forest was exactly where a bathtub belonged. We laughed because that's what you do when something makes you uneasy and you're 10 and you don't have another option. We named it Bigfoot's bathroom. We made jokes. We kept walking. An hour later, we were not laughing anymore. Nothing looked familiar. Nothing at all. Not a single trail marker. Not a recognizable tree. Not a sound from any road. We had been walking for almost 2 hours total, and we were nowhere. Callie started to cry a little. I didn't because I was too busy being angry, which in hindsight was just fear wearing a different outfit. I told her we should follow the sun, walk west, stay with it, eventually hit a road or someone's property. She said no, she had a different idea about which direction to go. We argued, Loud, scared 10-year-old girl arguing, the kind that's all frustration and no logic. And then I said the dumbest thing I have ever said in my entire life. I told her if she was so sure, she should go her way and I'd go mine, and we'd see who got out first. She went left, I went right, and just like that, we were alone. I want to be very clear about something, now that I'm older and I can look back on this clearly. Splitting up in an unfamiliar forest at dusk, as a child, is possibly the single worst decision a person can make. I know that. I knew it about 8 minutes after I made it, because that's when I heard the footsteps. Behind me. Maybe 100 feet back. Steady, deliberate. The sound of something moving through dry leaves and breaking small branches. I assumed it was Callie, that she'd changed her mind and was following me after all. So I slowed down to let her catch up. The footsteps slowed down too. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I stood there for a long moment in the growing dark. Then I started walking again, a little faster this time. The footsteps started again. Same pace, matching mine exactly. I slowed. They slowed. I sped up. They sped up. This went on for what felt like hours. Maybe it was. I picked up a long, thick branch from the ground, swung it hard against a tree trunk to test it, make sure it wouldn't snap, and kept moving. I told myself it was a deer, told myself it was Callie, told myself it was nothing. Something in the back of my skull did not believe any of those things. The light was almost completely gone when I came around a cluster of overgrown briars and stopped dead. There it was, the old bathtub, sitting right in front of me, ivy-covered, rust-streaked, exactly as we'd left it. Bigfoot's bathroom. I had walked for hours. I had followed the sun the entire time. I was certain of it, absolutely certain, and I had walked in a perfect circle back to the exact same spot. How does that happen? I sat down on an old log and I just screamed, full voice, no holding back. Just let it out into the trees. I beat the branch against the ground until my arms were tired, and then I sat there breathing hard, trying to think, trying not to completely fall apart. And then I heard the footsteps again, coming up behind me. I called out Callie's name as loud as I could. Silence. A long pause. And then the footsteps started running. I was on my feet and sprinting before my brain had time to make a decision. Pure instinct, full speed through the darkening trees, branches whipping my arms and face, leaves and roots and holes in the ground trying to take me down at every step. I ran until my lungs were burning and my vision was going white at the edges, and then I looked up. The sky above the trees had changed. There was a cloud directly overhead, and I want to be careful here because I know how this is going to sound. But I am telling you exactly what I saw. It was the darkest cloud I have ever seen in my life. Not storm dark, not rain dark. Black. In the center it was so black it looked like a hole punched through the sky, like looking into deep space, and the gray around the edges was moving, slowly, heavily, swirling inward, and coming from that cloud were sounds like church bells, deep, slow, resonant. Booming bells rolling down out of that thing like they were being rung directly above my head. I stopped running. I don't know why. My legs just stopped. I stood there in the dark Virginia woods, 10 years old, alone, something running behind me, and above me this impossible cloud ringing like the loudest church in the world, and I felt something I have never felt before or since. Complete, total, absolute dread. The kind that isn't fear of a specific thing. It's the fear that something is fundamentally wrong with the world in a way you cannot fix or understand or escape. Every single part of me, not just my brain, but my bones, my skin, my stomach, was screaming one sentence. If you do not run from that cloud right now, you will never be seen again. Not you might get hurt, not you might get lost, gone, forever. Like I had never existed. I turned hard to the right and ran. away from the footsteps, away from the cloud, away from everything, into complete darkness, completely blind, just moving, crashing through branches and stumbling over roots and going down on my hands and knees and getting back up and running again, over and over, for what must have been another 40 minutes, until my shins hit something low and hard and I went completely airborne. I hit the ground so hard every bit of air left my lungs at once. I just laid there in the dirt, unable to breathe, staring up through the canopy, and slowly, very slowly, I realized I couldn't hear the bells anymore. The woods were quiet. As my eyes adjusted, I made out what had tripped me, an old split rail fence, weathered and half buried in vines, but solid, and fences don't exist in the middle of nowhere. Fences belong to someone. I grabbed hold of it with both hands and I followed it. For about a mile, uphill, through the dark, I followed that fence, until the trees thinned and I came over a rise and saw lights, a farmhouse, a porch light burning gold in the dark like the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. I walked up to the back door and knocked. An older man answered. I was covered head to toe in cuts and scrapes. My clothes were torn. I was filthy and bleeding and shaking so hard I could barely talk. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He got me a glass of water, put me in his truck and drove me home. It was past 9 o'clock at night when I walked through my front door. Callie had gotten out shortly after we split up. She'd assumed I made it back the same way. My family had assumed I was just out late, which wasn't unusual for me. Nobody had been looking. Nobody knew I was gone. My parents were horrified when they saw the state I was in. I told them most of what happened. I left out the cloud. I've left out the cloud every single time I've told this story, until now, because I genuinely don't know what to do with it. I don't know what it was. I don't know what was in those bells, or why looking at it felt like it was pulling something out of me. I don't know what was following me through those woods for hours. What I know is this. I found a fence. The fence led to a farm, and I made it home. But some nights I lie awake and think about the version of that story where I don't find the fence, where I keep running blind in the dark, where eventually I just stop. I think about whether anyone would have found me, and then I think about that cloud, and I wonder what was in it, and whether, on some level, it's still waiting. Story 2. The job I took when I was younger didn't just mess with my head. It changed the way I see things, permanently. It wasn't supposed to be anything serious, just a clean-up job. You know, water damage, fire damage, basic stuff. I was young, needed money, and honestly, I was just glad to have steady work. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Just long days, dirty work, weird smells, nothing I couldn't handle. But then, things started to feel off. Not right away, just small moments where something didn't make sense, but you brush it off because you don't want to be that person, the one who freaks out over nothing. A few days in, my boss called me into his office and told me I was being moved to a special crew. No real explanation, just said the jobs would be different, more serious, and that I'd be leading it. No training, no details, just a van, some equipment, and a weird feeling I couldn't shake. That's when everything changed. Our first job was a house where someone had passed away alone. By the time we got there, everything was already cleared out, or at least that's what I was told. We were just there to clean, sanitize, make the place livable again. Simple, right? But the moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. Not scary, not yet, just heavy. Like the air itself was thicker, harder to breathe. I told myself it was just the heat, the gear, the situation, something logical. We got to work. At first, everything was normal. And then I noticed the chair, the one we were taking apart. It moved, just slightly, but enough to make me stop. I looked around. No one else was there. The other guys were downstairs. I stood there for a second, trying to make sense of it, then told myself I was just tired and kept going. But then it happened again. That's when I felt it, a chill, not cold air, something deeper, something that didn't belong there. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to sound crazy. That was my first mistake. A few minutes later, the guys downstairs came running up, panicking, talking over each other, saying someone was down there, someone, in a house that was supposed to be empty. That's when I noticed something else. None of us had heard a door open or close. So how did someone get in? We went down to check, slow and careful, expecting to find someone hiding, but there was nothing, no one, just disturbed dust, like something had been moving around recently. That's when I started asking myself, what did they actually see? Because they all saw something, and they all described it differently. Later, I realized something was missing, a cleaning bottle I had just set down, gone. I searched everywhere, getting more frustrated by the second, until I found it behind a stack of bags, in a place it couldn't have been moved to without someone physically putting it there. That's when I heard it, a whisper, too quiet to understand, but close enough that I felt it right next to me, like someone was standing there. That night, none of us slept well, because we all had the same dream, not similar, the same, an older man, angry, telling us we didn't belong there, that we were touching things we shouldn't. And the weirdest part, he kept coughing, the same sound we thought we heard earlier in the house. That's when something clicked. Maybe this wasn't just stress, but I ignored it. I needed the job. That was my second mistake. A couple weeks later, we got another job. Different house, different situation. But the second I stepped inside, I felt it again. That same pressure, that same heaviness, like the house didn't want us there. We went downstairs to start working, and suddenly the lights went out. No flicker, no warning, just darkness. But the equipment was still running. That didn't make sense. That's when my coworker started screaming, not yelling, not surprised, screaming like something was right in front of him. I grabbed my flashlight, hands shaking, turned it on, and for just a second I saw something, a shape, a person maybe, standing where he was looking. Then it was gone, just gone, but he didn't stop screaming, because whatever he saw didn't disappear for him. He ran out of that house and didn't come back that day. And honestly, I don't blame him, because after that, I started seeing things too. Not clearly, never directly, always just at the edge of my vision. A shadow, a movement, something watching, then gone, like it didn't want to be seen, just noticed. Then came the worst job, not because of what we had to do, but because of how it felt. The moment we walked in, it hit us. Fear. Not normal fear, something deeper, like it wasn't ours, like we were feeling something left behind. It came in waves, strong enough to make your legs feel weak, strong enough to make you stop what you were doing. And then we heard it, faint, barely there, like it was coming from somewhere else, a voice asking for help. We both heard it at the same time. That's when we looked at each other and didn't say anything, because we both knew we weren't imagining it. After that, things started moving, footsteps running through the house, doors slamming somewhere we couldn't see, but nothing was ever there when we checked. And the strangest part, you could feel it, like something running past you, but there was nothing there. That's when I realized something I wish I hadn't. These places weren't empty. We finished the job somehow, and the second we stepped outside, everything stopped. The fear, the pressure, gone instantly, like flipping a switch. That's when I knew it wasn't just in our heads, because if it was, why did it disappear the moment we left? I stayed at that job longer than I should have, convincing myself it was just stress, just part of the work. But deep down, I knew better. And even now, I still think about those houses and that feeling that something was still there long after we left. And honestly, I don't think we were cleaning those places. I think we were disturbing something, and I don't know if it ever really left. Story 3. Most people who almost die say the same thing afterward. They say it was peaceful. They say they saw light. They say they felt love, warmth, like everything was going to be okay. I used to believe that. I don't anymore. My name is Ryan. I'm 34 years old. I live outside of Nashville, Tennessee. Regular neighborhood, regular job, regular life. I coach youth baseball on weekends. I mow my own lawn. I am the last person who should be telling a story like this, but here I am. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday in October, 2 years ago. I was at the gym, same routine I'd had for years, when something went wrong with my heart. Just wrong. That's the only word that fits. 1 second I was fine. The next, the weights were on the floor and I was on my knees and the room was tilting sideways in a way rooms aren't supposed to tilt. I don't remember hitting the ground. I don't remember the paramedics. What I do remember is what came after. It didn't feel like dying. That's the first thing that's always bothered me every single day since. Because dying should feel like nothing, right? Like a light switch going off, like a screen going dark. That's the logical thing. That's what I always assumed. But it wasn't that. It wasn't anything like that. It started with silence. Not the kind of silence you get late at night when the neighborhood finally goes quiet. This was something else, something deeper, something that had weight to it, like the air had been replaced with something denser, something that pressed against you from all sides without ever touching you. I just stood there in it, except I wasn't standing, I didn't have a body, I wasn't anywhere, but I was still me, and that right there, was the first thing that felt wrong. At first, nothing seemed alarming. The silence was still, almost restful, the kind of stillness you chase your whole life and never quite find. I told myself to just let it be, breathe into it, accept it, and for a moment I almost did. That's when I noticed the silence was noticing me back. That's how I'd describe it, and I know how that sounds. But there's no other way to put it. The quiet around me shifted, like something vast and patient had turned its full attention in my direction, like I had been spotted. And then came the presence. Warm, just warm, like standing in a patch of sunlight through a window on a cold morning. Familiar in a way I couldn't quite place, the kind of familiar that reaches into your chest and just settles there. I thought of my grandfather immediately. Earl. He passed when I was 19, and losing him was one of the hardest things I'd been through. He was the kind of man who fixed things with his hands and never raised his voice. If anyone was going to meet me here, it would be him. So I told myself, that's Earl. That's what this is. And for about 30 seconds, I believed it, but something felt off. Because I should have known, not believed, known, not told myself. The way you recognize your own mother's voice in a crowded room, instant, certain, no questions, no work involved. This took work. This felt like being handed a name tag and told who to recognize. And the longer I held that question, the more the warmth around me began to change, slowly, slowly enough that I almost missed it. The silence got louder. I know that makes no sense, but that's exactly what happened. It shifted from stillness to pressure, like a sound too low to hear but high enough to feel in your back teeth. And then I saw the lights, thousands of them, floating in every direction. No floor, no ceiling, no walls, just a vast dark space filled with points of light that pulsed gently, rhythmically, like breathing, each one slightly different. Each one with a quality I can only call distinct, like fingerprints, like each light was its own something. And I knew, or I believed, that they were souls. That might sound beautiful. It wasn't. Because I looked closer, The way you look closer at something when your gut is already talking before your eyes catch up. They weren't moving freely. They were hovering, suspended, every single one facing the same direction with a precision that couldn't be accidental. All of them facing me, every single one. They were waiting. That's when the presence got closer. The warmth, that almost eerie feeling, had been drifting nearby until now, but it moved, deliberately, and whatever distance existed between us, in a place with no real space, collapsed fast. It wasn't holding me, it was guiding me. There's a difference. A hand on your shoulder is comfort. A hand wrapped around your arm is direction. It means someone has already decided where you're going. I didn't feel like I had a choice. Why does this feel controlled? That thought hit me like cold water. If this was peace, the beautiful quiet afterlife people talk about in church basements and morning talk shows, why did it feel like a process? Why were those lights lined up? Who lines up? That's when the sound started. Low, constant. Not music. Nothing as comforting as music. More like the hum a building makes when all its systems are running at once. A mechanical regularity that had no business being in a place like this. And the lights responded to it, pulsing faster, synchronized, like a signal had been given. They began to drift, barely, almost imperceptibly toward me. Not me toward them toward me. I tried to pull back. Nothing happened. That was the moment the fear became real. Not unease, not that low-grade wrongness I'd been carrying since the silence turned heavy. Real fear, the kind that bypasses your brain entirely and lands straight in your stomach. In every direction I reached, and I don't mean physically, I mean whatever reaching even is when you have no body. There was nothing, no edge, no wall, no way back, and that presence that felt like Earl. It was still guiding me forward. I broke. I don't have the right language for what I did, but whatever that reaching was, I pushed against it, rejected it, turned away as hard as I could in a place where direction doesn't mean anything, and something changed. The warmth disappeared, instantly, like a door slamming shut, like a hand releasing your arm and pulling back into the dark. Everything got heavier, colder, like I had broken a rule I didn't know existed. The sound got louder, the lights got closer, and for the first time in that place, I didn't feel welcomed. I felt expected, the way a trap expects what it was built for, like I had always been meant to end up there, and had simply arrived ahead of schedule. And then it happened. Something pulled me, violent, sudden, no warning, like a rope I didn't know was tied to me, snapped taut, and yanked me backward through that entire dark space in less than a second. And I was back, gasping, my chest heaving, the gym ceiling above me, those ugly fluorescent lights, a paramedic's face inches from mine. They told me later my heart had stopped for almost 4 minutes. 4 minutes. In 4 minutes, I had been wherever that was. People ask if the experience changed me with this hopeful look, like I'm going to say I found peace. I don't say that, because nobody asks the people with the beautiful stories, are you sure it was peace, or did it just feel that way at first? Because warmth can be a trap, familiarity can be constructed, and something that wants you to walk toward it willingly has every reason in the world to feel like coming home. It's been 2 years. My heart is fine now. Doctors put in a small device, changed my diet, told me I was one of the lucky ones, and I smiled and nodded because they're right. I am lucky. But there are nights, quiet nights, the house dark, Nashville doing that thing it does in October where the air gets cold and smells like wood smoke, where the silence changes just for a second, just enough, that same weight, that same pressure, like a frequency I accidentally tuned back into. And sometimes I feel the presence again. It doesn't feel like Earl anymore. Maybe it never did. Maybe I just needed it to. But it's there, patient, unhurried, the way something waits when it knows it doesn't have to rush. And I think about those lights, all of them lined up, all of them still, all of them facing the same direction. They didn't look surprised to see me. They looked like they'd already made room. I still don't know what that place was. I've read everything, talked to doctors, sat in the back of a church for the first time in 15 years just to see if it helped. It didn't, because the thing that scares me isn't the not knowing, it's knowing that something over there knows me. And one day, I'm going back, and this time, I don't think I'll be able to pull away. Story 4. I don't usually tell this story, not because it didn't happen, but because every time I do, I watch the way people look at me change. There's this moment, right when I get to the part that can't be explained, where their eyes go quiet, and they stop asking questions, so I stop telling it. Until now, it was a few years back. I was stationed away from home for a stretch, sent down to the Florida Panhandle for some specialized cyber training, Fort Walton Beach area. Beautiful place. Spanish moss, salt air, the kind of town that feels like it exists slightly outside of time. I was put up at the Holiday Inn Resort on the water since all the on-base lodging was full. Nice room, 4th floor, small balcony overlooking the pool. That detail matters. Trust me, for the first few weeks everything was normal. Training during the day, a quiet dinner, lights out early. I'm not a superstitious person, I've never been. I've always been the guy at the table who rolls his eyes when the ghost stories start. I need proof. I need logic. I need something that makes sense. What happened that night didn't make sense. It was a Friday, end of a long week. A few of us from the training group went out. Nothing crazy, just a couple of drinks, some laughs, the usual stuff you do when you're away from home and need to unwind. I got back to the hotel somewhere close to 3 in the morning. The lobby was empty. That hum of silence that only exists in hotels after midnight. You know the one. That fluorescent quiet that makes you feel like you're the last person on earth. I wasn't tired yet. I'd slept in that morning, and honestly, I hadn't drunk that much. So I just lay there on the bed, staring at the ceiling. That's when I heard it, laughing, outside, not faint either, not muffled through 3 floors of concrete and glass, clear, almost crisp, like it was floating up through the wind and landing right outside my balcony door. Now you have to understand, it was a wild night outside. The kind of wind that shoves you sideways, bends the palm trees, comes off the Gulf cold and angry, loud enough to hear through that. I sat up. I slid open the balcony door and stepped outside. The wind hit me like a wall, chilly, heavy, smelling like the ocean. And below me, around the pool area, I saw them, a couple, in the water, swimming together in slow circles, laughing and talking, their voices carrying up through the wind like it wasn't even there. At first, I wasn't alarmed. Drunk tourists sneak into hotel pools all the time. I get it. But then I looked closer. Something was wrong with the way they looked. I don't know how else to say this without sounding like I lost my mind. They were gray and glowing, kind of. Not bright. Not like they had a flashlight or anything. Just luminous. In a way that had nothing to do with the pool lights. I told myself it was the water, refraction, the way light bends through moving water at weird angles at night. I almost convinced myself the pool had this big circular design, wide open, with a tall island rock formation right in the center, like a small cliff rising up from the middle of the water, decorative, You see them at fancy resort pools. I had a clear view of the whole thing from up above. Every angle, every entry point, the gate that led out to the beach, the walkway along the side. There was nowhere to go without me seeing it. I watched them for a few minutes. They were close together now, arms around each other, moving slowly toward the far side of the rock. That small area just behind it, the only blind spot in my entire view. They slipped behind it, and I waited 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10. I figured, okay, couple of drunk people, middle of the night, private spot behind a rock. I get it. I gave them their privacy. But 15 minutes went by, then 30, then 45. They never came out. Now, I want you to really think about what I'm saying. I had eyes on every exit. The gate to the beach, clear. The walkway, clear. The open water around the rock, clear. There was no way to leave that pool area without crossing my line of sight, and I had been watching intently. The way you watch something when your brain starts whispering that something isn't right. After over an hour, I made a decision. I was going down there. I pulled on my shoes, rode the elevator down, walked through that empty, humming lobby. Still no one at the front desk, just the glow of a monitor behind the counter, and pushed through the side door out to the pool. The wind was worse out here, raw, the kind of cold that gets into your ears. I walked the whole perimeter. Nothing. Not a wet towel. Not a puddle of footprints. Not the distant sound of the beach gate swinging shut. Nothing. I was standing there, trying to make sense of it, when something to my left caught my eye. The hot tub. It was on. Jets going. Bubbles churning. Steam rising off the surface into the cold night air. And here's the part that sent something cold straight down my spine. Hotel hot tubs like this one run on an automatic timer. 60 minutes. Then they shut off. You have to physically go to the panel and restart them. I had been watching this pool area for over an hour from my balcony. I never saw a single person touch that panel. I never saw anyone near the hot tub. I walked back inside, slowly. I went up to the front desk and waited. A young guy came out from the back office, half asleep, confused to see a guest standing there at 3 a.m. I asked him, calmly I think, if the security camera showed anyone in the pool area in the last hour or two. He looked at me the way people look at someone they're not sure about. He checked. He said no. He said the pool area had been empty all night. I went back upstairs, lay down on my bed, stared at the ceiling again. I'm a logical person. I went through every explanation I could think of. A reflection of something, a trick of the light, 2 people who managed to leave the pool area. In the one moment I looked away for over an hour. None of it holds. None of it explains the gray glow. None of it explains the hot tub. Here's what I know. I've lived a pretty skeptical life. I don't believe things without evidence. That's just who I am. But something was in that pool that night. Something that laughed, that swam, that moved together like 2 people in love, and then just wasn't there anymore. I still think about it sometimes. Not obsessively, just quietly. The way you turn a strange object over in your hands, looking for the seam, the trick, the explanation. I haven't found it yet, and I'm starting to wonder if I ever will. Story 5. Some days feel almost too good to be real. And sometimes, that's exactly when something finds you. It had been one of those rare, perfect days, the kind where everything just clicks. I'd gotten some genuinely good news that morning, The kind that makes you feel like the weight you've been carrying finally lifted off your shoulders. I was smiling at strangers. I was singing along to songs I didn't even know the words to. I was in a great mood, and I wanted to do something I love. So I stopped at the Goodwill off Route 9, the big one near the edge of town, always crowded on a Tuesday afternoon, carts bumping into each other, kids running between the racks, that familiar smell of old books and someone else's past. I was in the housewares aisle, just browsing, just happy. That's when I felt it. Not heard, not saw, felt. That specific primal feeling that someone is watching you. The kind that doesn't wait for your brain to catch up. It just fires straight down your spine and tells your body to pay attention. I turned around slowly. The aisle wasn't empty. There was one other person nearby. A young woman. Maybe 18, maybe 25. It was hard to place her exactly. Pale skin, very pale. Dark hair, dressed completely in black, from her collar to her shoes. She wasn't looking at the shelves. She wasn't holding anything. No basket, no purse, no phone. Her hands were at her sides, and her eyes were locked directly on me. Not glancing, not drifting, locked, dark eyes. I mean really dark. The kind of dark that doesn't catch light the way eyes usually do. And there was something about the way she was looking at me that I cannot fully put into words even now. It wasn't curiosity. It wasn't attraction. It wasn't confusion. It was like being studied, like being measured for something. My very first thought, and I remember this clearly, was, she doesn't belong here. Not in a rude way. Not a judgment about her clothes or her age or anything like that. It was something much deeper and much older than a thought. It was animal instinct. Like every cell in my body had taken a vote and unanimously decided, move, now. So I did. I grabbed my cart and I walked away. Fast, but not running. I told myself I was overreacting, told myself she was probably just zoned out, probably just having a weird day, probably nothing. I turned my head to check, and she was right beside me, on the other side of the aisle. Same distance, same posture, same eyes. I want you to understand what I mean when I say right beside me. I had walked at least 30 feet. The aisle was long. There is no version of normal movement that puts you where I just was, and where she now was in the time that passed. She hadn't walked there. She was just there. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask if she needed help or if she knew me. Something very deep and very quiet inside me said, do not engage. Do not make eye contact again. Leave. So I left. I was heading toward the front of the store, cart still in hand, heart beating just a little too fast, when the door swung open and in walked my niece Danny and her husband Greg and their 2 kids. Of all the days, of all the stores, of all the moments, I laughed. I actually laughed. That kind of surprised, relieved laugh you get when something familiar shows up right when you needed it. We spoke for a few minutes near the entrance. I didn't mention the woman. I didn't want to say it out loud and make it real. I hugged them, said goodbye, and went home. The rest of the day was normal, completely, blessedly normal. I made dinner. I watched something on TV. I told myself the woman was just a person having a strange moment, and I was a person who'd been having such a good day that my senses were just heightened, just raw. My phone rang. It was Greg, my niece's husband, calling from his cell. The call dropped immediately. I live out in the woods. The signal's always been unreliable out here. I tried calling back on my landline, but didn't connect either. And that's when the text came through. Hey, really odd, I know, but do you remember a young woman dressed in black at the Goodwill today? Maybe 18 to 25? I went cold. I mean that literally. Head to toe all at once. Cold because I knew. Before I even responded, before the call connected, before I heard his voice, I already knew he had seen her. He had felt it too. And the fact that he felt the need to text me about it hours later, at night, from his own home, meant it had stayed with him the same way it stayed with me. I tried calling again. This time it went through. Greg is not a person who rattles easily. He's a grown man with a job, a family, responsibilities. He's not someone who calls people at night because a stranger at the thrift store gave him a weird look. But his voice when I picked up was careful, like he was choosing his words in a very deliberate way. He described the exact same eyes, the exact same stillness, the exact same locked, soul-drilling stare. And he described the same thing I did. He had walked away from her. He had turned back. She was already there. We talked for a while, trying to make sense of it, trying to find the logical explanation, the rational corner we could back it into and make it small. Store security? Someone playing a prank? A person with a condition that affects social behavior? None of it held. Because you can explain eyes, you can explain staring, you can explain awkward social behavior. You cannot explain what we both saw. And here's the part that made the hair on my arms stand up all over again. My niece Dani was with Greg the entire time. She was right there, and she never saw the woman at all. Never. Not once. She thought her husband was losing it, until he called me. Why did two of us see her, and one of us didn't? I don't have an answer for that. I've been turning it over in my head for hours, and I genuinely do not have an answer. After we hung up, I went through every room in my house. I shut every curtain and every blind. I locked every door and checked every window. I lit candles, white ones, and I said a quiet prayer asking for protection over my home and everyone in it. And then I sat there in the candlelight, shaking, at 50 years old, genuinely afraid of something I couldn't name and couldn't explain. I did eventually sleep. I put salt along the windowsills, old habit from my grandmother. I don't know if it does anything, but it made me feel like I was doing something, and sometimes that's enough. When I woke up the next morning, the house was the same. The world was the same. Whatever it was, it hadn't followed me home. And honestly, that has to be enough. But here's the thing I keep coming back to, even now. This wasn't the first time something like this found me. Years before the Goodwill, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I was browsing through an antique shop a few towns over. One of those narrow, cluttered places with too much furniture stacked too close together and a bell above the door. I turned a corner between an old wardrobe and a stack of picture frames, and I saw a man. He was standing in the back of the store, older, just standing there. And the moment I saw him, I felt it, that same feeling, that same deep cellular wrongness, that cold recognition. I didn't run this time. I walked, very calmly, very quickly, straight to the front counter. The owner looked up and I asked him, without any preamble, "Do you have a ghost in this store?" I expected him to laugh. Instead, he turned toward the back and yelled, and I mean yelled, "Marie, that ghost is out front bothering people again." Like it was a Tuesday, like this was just a known, documented, ongoing situation that they had simply accepted. I didn't stay to find out more. I think about both of those moments more than I probably should. The woman in black at the Goodwill, the man in the antique store, the way Greg and I both felt it and Danny didn't, the way certain things seem to find certain people in perfectly ordinary places on perfectly ordinary days. I don't know what I saw. I don't know why some people see and some people don't. What I know is that the world has more layers than we usually let ourselves think about. And sometimes, on a random Tuesday afternoon, one of those layers peels back just enough to look at you. I'll leave my curtains closed for a while longer, just in case. Story 6. There are houses you grow up in, and there are houses that grow into you. And sometimes, the thing that gets inside you didn't come from the house at all. I was 8 years old when my family moved to the property on Delwood Road. It sat at the edge of a forest so dense that even on the brightest summer afternoons, the tree line looked like a wall of shadow. The kind of forest that has no visible end. The kind that makes you feel, for reasons you can't quite explain, like it's been there a very long time and is not particularly happy about your arrival. My parents had reservations. My dad was practical about it. He worried about raccoons getting into our trash cans, maybe a bear or two, the usual rural wildlife concerns. My mom worried about us kids wandering too far in and getting turned around, but the price was right. The house itself was beautiful, and my dad honestly liked the quiet. We were kids. We were just excited about the backyard. We had 2 dogs at the time, 2 golden retrievers, Huckleberry and Biscuit, big, goofy, fearless dogs who had never been scared of anything in their entire lives. They were terrified of that forest. From the very first day, they refused to go past the tree line. Not for a ball, not for a stick, not for a treat held out by hand at the edge of the trees. If a toy bounced past the first row of trunks, they would sit at the boundary and whine, but they would not go in. When one of us walked into the trees, they paced the yard until we came back, visibly stressed, watching the spot where we disappeared. My brother Eli, always the one to push things, decided one afternoon to just carry Biscuit in. He thought maybe if the dog felt safe in his arms, she'd realize there was nothing to worry about. He made it maybe 15 feet past the tree line. Biscuit twisted out of his grip so hard she scratched his arm pretty good, hit the ground running, and didn't stop until she was inside the house, with the door between her and the world. She never went near the trees again, not once in 4 years. The noises started maybe 2 or 3 weeks after we moved in, at dusk mostly, when the light was going gold and the shadows were stretching long across the yard. We'd hear it from the back porch, the sound of someone walking through dry leaves, the crack of a stick underfoot, the soft rustle of branches being pushed aside, steady, deliberate movement, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. We'd call out, "Hello? Anyone there?" Nothing. But if we shined a flashlight into the trees, sometimes, just for a second, just at the edge of the beam, something would move, upright, tall, gone before you could look directly at it. My parents stopped letting us go into the forest at all after dark. Even during the day, we weren't allowed out of sight of the house. The first really bad night was my sister Maya's. She was 12. Her bedroom faced the backyard, and one night she woke up and looked out her window and saw someone standing at the edge of the yard, right at the boundary where the grass met the trees. She called for my dad. She told him there was a man standing in the yard staring at her window. My dad went straight outside with a flashlight, and Maya, she kept watching from her window the whole time. She watched my dad cross the yard toward the figure, watched his flashlight sweep across the lawn. The figure didn't move. It just stood there while my dad approached, and when the flashlight beam passed directly through where it was standing, It wasn't there anymore. Not gone like it stepped back into the trees. Just not there. Between one heartbeat and the next, gone. My dad told us it was probably a deer or a trick of the light against the tree trunks at night. We nodded along because that was easier. But Maya didn't sleep with her curtains open again for the rest of the time we lived there. The knocking started sometime that first fall. Back door. Always the back door. Always at night. 3 or 4 solid knocks. Then silence. My parents assumed it was neighborhood kids messing around. We were a little outside town but not totally isolated. They stopped bothering to answer it. Until one night in November, it was raining hard, the kind of rain that comes in sideways off the mountains and turns the yard to mud in 20 minutes. The knocking that night was different, faster, more urgent, almost frantic. My mom said, what if someone's in trouble? What if someone got caught out in that rain and needs help? So she opened the back door. No one there. She stepped out onto the porch to look both ways and noticed immediately that the porch was completely dry. No wet footprints, no muddy tracks. In a downpour that heavy, anyone who had walked up those steps would have left water everywhere. The porch was dry. After that, my parents had a security camera installed above the back door, and the knocking continued several times a month, sometimes clustering close together, then going quiet for weeks. Every single time my parents checked the footage, nothing. The door, the porch, the yard behind it, empty, every time. Then, 3 years in, things took a turn that still bothers me most of all. My brother Eli started sleepwalking. He'd never done it before in his life, never had night terrors, never had sleep issues of any kind. But starting around his 14th birthday, he began getting up in the night without waking up, walking out the back door and heading toward the forest. My mom is a light sleeper. She'd hear the door and run out in time to guide him back to bed before he made it to the trees. It happened 3 times in about 6 weeks. After the 4th time, Eli asked to see the security footage. He said he just wanted to see what he looked like. Thought it'd be funny, he said. Wanted to see himself walking around like a zombie. We watched the footage together in the kitchen. Eli walked out onto the porch. And then he stopped, and he stood very still, like he was listening to something. Then, slowly, clearly, he shook his head, like he was answering something, like someone had asked him a question and he was saying no. And then he walked forward, not like a sleepwalker moves in movies, not stiff-armed and blank. He walked reluctantly, resistant, like something had hold of him that he was leaning back against but couldn't stop. Nobody said anything in the kitchen for a long time after we watched that. We thought about it differently after that, and we started paying closer attention. A few weeks later, my dad was in the backyard just before dinner, and he heard my sister, Maya, calling from inside the trees. Her voice, clear as anything, coming from deep in the forest, maybe 40 or 50 feet in, saying she'd gotten her jacket caught in some branches and needed help getting it loose. My dad ran straight in. Of course he did. He went maybe 30 feet into the trees, calling back to her, telling her to stay still. He was coming, but the voice kept seeming to come from a little further ahead, a little further in, always just out of reach. It was getting darker by the second and he couldn't find her. He called back to the house and told her to stay where she was while he grabbed a flashlight. He came inside. Maya was in the kitchen. She'd been inside for the last hour. My dad sat down in a chair and didn't say anything for about 5 minutes. He didn't tell us what had happened until months later. I think he needed some time to figure out what to do with it. He never told me, so when it happened to me, I didn't know to be afraid. It was an evening in early spring. I was out in the backyard with Huckleberry and Biscuit, just throwing a ball around before dinner. The dogs were happy, the light was still okay, everything was fine, and then I heard my mum's voice from inside the trees. She was saying she'd gone in to pick some wild mint. She'd been on a cooking kick, always trying new things in the kitchen, and she'd gotten her sweater caught in some thorns and needed me to come help. I started walking toward the tree line. I didn't question it. Why would I? It was my mum's voice. It sounded exactly like her. Warm, a little distracted, the way she always sounded when she was in the middle of something. The dogs started barking. My dad was watching from the kitchen window, and he saw me crossing the yard toward the forest. He came outside and called to me. I called back that I was just helping Mom get unstuck. He yelled, and I mean yelled, not conversationally. He yelled that Mom was inside the house, and I needed to run back to him right now. I ran. I didn't look back. I've thought about that a lot over the years, why I didn't look back. Maybe some part of me knew that I didn't want to see what was standing at the edge of those trees, using my mother's voice, waiting for a small kid to come close enough to the shadows. After that, my parents had a fence built around the entire backyard. A high wooden fence, solid posts, no gaps. And they started quietly looking for somewhere else to live. But the thing, whatever it was, didn't seem to appreciate the fence. The knocking on the back door got more frequent, louder, and it spread, tapping on the windows now too, on all sides of the house, like something was walking the perimeter, checking every point of entry, methodical and patient. We'd hear scratching along the fence line at night, and sometimes voices, low, indistinct, but unmistakably vocal, from beyond the fence in the dark. Eli's sleepwalking got worse. He started going out almost every week. One night my mom didn't hear the door. She woke up to the dogs barking inside the house and went out to find Eli standing at the fence, hands gripping the top rail, staring through the slats into the forest. She said his eyes were open, but he wasn't there. He was gone within himself, standing at that fence, staring at something in the dark. We moved out on a Thursday morning in late October, 4 years after we had arrived. That last morning, I came downstairs early. The sun had barely come up, and the back door was standing wide open. No wind, no broken lock, just open, swinging slightly on its hinges like someone had pushed through it calmly and walked out. My mom checked the security footage. It showed the door slowly, smoothly swinging open on its own. No hand, no figure, just the door opening, like an invitation or a conclusion. We left within the hour. Eli still gets night terrors. He has anxiety now that he manages with medication and therapy. He's doing okay, he's built a good life. But a few weeks ago he called me out of the blue, and after some small talk he said, kind of joking around, "Do you think the door being open that last morning meant it finally got in?" He laughed, said he was just being dramatic, getting into a Halloween mood, whatever. But his voice had that careful quality to it, the way people talk when they're joking about something they actually mean. I didn't answer right away, because honestly, I think about that question more than I should. I think about Eli standing at the fence. I think about the voice in the trees that sounded exactly like my mom. I think about Maya watching that figure disappear when the flashlight hit it. I think about Huckleberry and Biscuit, who knew from day one, who knew before any of us ever had a reason to. Animals know things we've trained ourselves not to. I don't know what was living in that forest. I don't know what it wanted or why it was so patient about it, why it spent 4 years knocking and calling and waiting and testing the edges of things. I don't know why it mimicked our voices. I don't know if it was one thing or many things or something that doesn't fit into any category I know how to use. What I know is this: whatever it was paying very close attention to us, and I have the feeling that it still remembers exactly where we went. I still can't sleep with the windows open. I live 300 miles from Delwood Road now, have for years. Different state, different life, but some nights, when it's very quiet, I hear something that sounds almost like knocking, and I don't open the door